Welcome to the Empathic Edge.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Empathic Edge with Megan Smith, founder of Empathic Edge. Megan is an attorney, negotiation professor, and dispute resolution professional focused on the future of human communication in an AI-driven world. Through negotiation strategy, emotional intelligence, and high-stakes conversation training, she helps professionals build confidence and perform more effectively under pressure. I'm Sean O'Connor, and today Megan and I are getting into communication skills professional education still misses. Obviously, there's a gap of some kind, and we're going to get into it. Hi, Megan.
Hey, Sean. Good to see you.
It's good to see you too. Obviously, we're implying that the training's not covering some important stuff. I'm curious. You work with highly trained professionals all the time. Like, why do they still struggle with conflict and feedback and difficult conversations like we've talked about in the past?
Well, even with highly trained professionals, I think that most of their training or their education, it's designed to build kind of a knowledge base and expertise, but it doesn't actually focus on performance under pressure. So, for instance, in law school, they'll test what you know. So, you may get questions about, what is BATNA? Actually, in our classes, we do have them do role play scenarios, but that's really one per week, and they don't get a lot of repetition. And so it's really difficult for even a trained professional to know what to do and how to behave when someone pushes back emotionally, when there's a silence, right? It comes down to a lot of the communication skills that you may or may not have developed when you were younger.
Right.
And yeah, and I think we make an assumption that, hey, you're trained, you should know this, but
Yeah.
it's really that experience, right? You need that repetitive practice. Otherwise, you could know everything cognitively, but your body isn't going to actually perform in the way that it should in the moment.
Got it. Are there specific skills that you think are, that there's a gap like that, I guess maybe aren't being taught or not being taught well?
Well, I'm not even positive that all schools, law schools in particular, and even business schools teach negotiations. I think it's becoming more prevalent, but in the last 10 years that I've been teaching and coaching dispute resolution, we kind of say we're kind of the redheaded stepchild. It's this newer thing, especially in law school. A lot of the focus is on trial advocacy, and even in moot court. So you're doing research, drafting a brief, presenting it to an appellate court. And there's been less focus on the actual negotiation skills, which is what we're really using every single day.
Yeah.
So even right now, in classes, I think we tend to teach theory a lot of the time. So knowing, what's an interest versus a position, coming up with a negotiation plan. But, we aren't that great really at teaching people how to deliver and receive difficult feedback without damaging a relationship,
Interesting.
how to manage our own emotions and how to kind of anticipate maybe the emotions of the other side or maybe your client.
Well,
Uh,
there's the empathy angle.
right, exactly. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. And we're not great at teaching that in law schools, especially it's very theoretical and
mhm.
like I said, sort of cognitive driven when really it's sort of like learning how to play a sport, right? You can
Yeah.
read about it all day long, but until
Yeah.
you actually practice it
Yeah,
and
you can
get in
watch
the
videos, etc. Right. It'll help. But well, it's interesting to me too, because I'm thinking, and I did not go to law school, although, I'm considering it. Um, is it too late? I don't think it's too late.
it is never too late. I'd love to hear more
Exactly.
about
Um,
that.
I feel like this work it's a primer, basically. In law school, I'm guessing, you're building a case, right? At some point, you're learning how to build a case, or hey, we're going to trial. What sort of we're going to do this? They're going to respond how, right? Like your scenario playing, and I would think you could be doing that on a okay, sure, they're going to do it. Like, but what's their personal reaction going to be? You know what I mean? Like, what's the emotional response going to be? I know, like in front of a jury, obviously the jury isn't they're just listening. And so you may be a good presenter, but that doesn't mean you're a good one-on-one. It's kind of an interesting dichotomy in my mind.
Exactly. That's true. Yeah, that could be a little more performative.
Yeah.
Whereas
Well,
I think
right.
that, yeah, the dispute resolution skills, I mean, it's ever changing in the moment. You don't know the other side, what their dynamic's going to be, what their personality is, unless you've dealt with them before.
Sure.
But even then, right, it could change
Different
on a
situation. Yeah.
exactly. Yep.
Or maybe they got better at it. Maybe they've taken some training. Um,
Yeah. Hopefully so.
yeah. What are there specific things that happen, when someone who, deeply expert in, in a particular field, but, limited experience navigating high pressure situations, interpersonal engagement.
Yeah, I think that so if you have this deep knowledge, right,
Yeah.
but not much experience, I think that that individual then tends to default to what they're good at.
Mm,
So that's focusing on things like more information, more logic, more credentials.
mm,
So the harder the conversation gets, the more they may lean on their expertise kind of as a shield.
yeah.
But what that may do is it may make the other person feel as though they're being talked at as opposed
Oh,
to being heard.
totally. I feel like there's some defensiveness that could creep in there on the part of the smarty pants, right?
Yeah,
Because they're not, they don't like to be challenged, or they feel there's, some level of threat there where like, oh, I don't quite know what I'm supposed to be saying here, or something's not working. Um,
exactly. Well,
yeah.
and Sean, even to that point, just thinking about my clients, it is very rare. I think that I have a client who says, or even hear about other people's clients say, I really wish my attorney talked in more legal speak and made things more complicated, right? Like what they say is, hey, I
Yeah.
appreciate that you spoke to me in a way that like it felt like you understood me and were speaking with me about the situation.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. Like it's like no different than, I mean, this is a thing in law, in medical school too. I mean, maybe they may even be more ahead of it in terms of, I mean, we're talking about bedside manner here in a certain way, right? It's like
Absolutely.
we talked about the different, like learning something conceptually, like learning communications conceptually versus practicing it in, realistic, emotionally charged situations. I mean, on the surface, I get like why that is different, but are there other things that people maybe aren't aware of and why there's such a gap in effectiveness?
Yeah, I think it's sort of like the issue that a lot of people have where they say, "Okay, I'm going to read about a thing before I do it. I kind of want to be an expert before I actually start getting into it." And so I'd like to equate it to swimming.
Hmm,
So you could read about swimming all day long, but before you actually get in the water, you're not really building any of that muscle memory
right.
and probably not going to be able to swim, right? And so in a classroom, you can really kind of think and pause and reconsider things. Whereas in that real conversation, you can't always wait, right? Maybe you have a job interview and they put you on the spot in the moment and they say, hey, this is what the salary expectation is. You're good with that, right?
No,
Right. And I mean, a good
definitely
negotiator.
not. Always definitely not.
Always definitely no, we need more. We need more. But a good negotiator has done the prep work beforehand to know like why, what their value is, why they should be valued at a higher amount, right? Or for a different package. But they also know that they can actually pause and say, like, maybe I can get back to you on this. Or hey, what would make you reconsider for higher pay? Like, I think I bring this value.
I was thinking of something you were talking about the pool, getting in the pool. Well, oh, I know what it is. I mean, and maybe you see this with your clients. I don't know, but again, we're talking about typically high achievers, right? Attorneys and such. They don't like to look stupid. Not, I mean, that's an extreme thing, but like nobody likes to look stupid, right? But I think to be a beginner, like in this, like sometimes, like we talked in a previous episode about, like these are soft skills where people diminish their importance or feel like they should know them. And I think there's a tendency, maybe it's human nature, where the idea that, hey, you need to learn this and practice it, and that doesn't make you unintelligent or whatever, like I think do you find there's resistance to people like, what do you mean I got to learn this?
Definitely. It actually came up this week. There was this attorney who basically said, well, I wouldn't need to practice with Empathic Edge, but my associates could. But
Mhm.
I already know everything I need to know. And I'm just sitting there thinking, man, I've taught this stuff for the better part of a decade and
Yeah.
I read about it. And when I say I practice it, I mean it's not just in my real everyday negotiations, but I practice hundreds, if not thousands of reps in a year with my law students because I,
Mm.
I want them to have that real interaction as well. And I don't consider myself an expert in my own mind. Like it's a
Right.
journey and I'm constantly learning and
Right.
learning how things affect me even in a particular moment or in a particular situation. So
Yeah.
I
Tell me
do.
you're perfect for the training without telling me you're perfect for the training. I already know everything. Like,
Well, right, exactly. And I'm like, oh man, but it's a journey, right? And things,
right.
it's even like teaching and education. We've all had those professors or teachers before who probably had a PowerPoint that had, 600 words on it and they've been doing it for 30 years, and you say, but just because you've been doing it, right, that doesn't mean that that's the most effective way to teach, nor does that really meet the needs of students nowadays.
Nor does anybody feel like they have the authority or the right to even question them. There's a power dynamic. Like, Professor, your PowerPoint sucks. You know what I mean? Like, maybe you've never heard that. What is it about role play, simulation, practice-based learning that makes it more effective than theory alone for building these communication skills?
Yeah, I think one way that it's really helppful is it activates the nervous system, so it's still higher stakes than just talking or reading about negotiating,
Mm-hmm.
but it's higher stakes than that, but lower stakes than when you're in the actual negotiation, right? And so you can't really fake that discomfort. There's going to be a level of discomfort. You will be uncomfortable in these different scenarios. And it's because you're realizing, hey, there's a different way that I could be going about this. Or wow, the way that I responded to that, I didn't realize I was making so many assumptions, or that would be so offensive to the other side. So I think that the repetition really helps make it, again, more automatic, building that muscle
Yeah.
memory. So you stop thinking about just technique and you start actually just using it kind of innately.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like, oh, I've been here before too. And
Hmm.
I mean, to me it seems obvious, but I'm curious, why do you think this training, communication training is still treated as uh, you know, secondary, less than to the technical expertise in so many professions? I mean, of course you need the technical, right? You got to pass the bar or whatever. But what do you think? Why the lag?
Well, I think I mean, kind of two big things. One of them, it goes back to what you said earlier, asked earlier, is are there professionals that say, no, I don't need this? And yes, I think admitting that you need communication training, something that you've been doing since you were a little kid, right, is talking. It can almost feel like admitting a weakness. I think,
Yeah.
hey, this
Well,
is something I've been doing my entire life. And I'm admitting that I'm not the best at it when maybe I think the idea is maybe I should be because I've just been doing it for so long. So there's that. And I think that the other reason really comes down to I think people think that that should belong in communication schools or in a communications class. Okay,
yeah.
that's what they're going to teach. Or maybe you take storytelling, or maybe that's acting, which I do think are phenomenal classes, especially for attorneys.
Hmm.
But they see that as something that people should automatically already be able to do and be able to do it well. For some reason, we just have that assumption.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we'll get into the whole like DNA of our culture and society, and we are raised to learn how to do things. And yeah, so it's got
Yeah,
to be prioritized in some way through
exactly. Well,
secondary schools and such. But
and if you think about it, I mean, I think learning about persuasion is a lot of fun. And I think people recognize that not everybody is great at storytelling or great at persuasion.
yeah.
And it's easy to say, well, they're just really good at that. They can tell a story. I can't do it that well. When
Hmm.
really you can practice and you can become a better storyteller.
Yeah. Yeah. There are certain techniques and structure, sort of intellectual things. You can approach it in an intellectual way to crack the code on that stuff for sure. It's always about personality and charisma. Megan, how do you think professional education uh, should evolve? You know what I mean? If these, communication, negotiation, emotional intelligence are increasingly uh, becoming core performance skills. I mean, really, they probably are, or I should say, now being recognized finally as core performance skills. What do you think needs to change?
I think, I mean, coming from an advocacy perspective, that simulation and practice, they need to be embedded. They shouldn't
Hmm.
be elective. When I was in law school, I did mock trial and that was an elective. I took advocacy courses where we focused more on the skills, and those were mostly elective. I only had to get a certain number of credit hours in order to graduate in that, but I kind of maxed it out. But I wasn't really incentivized to, because it could affect your GPA
Oh,
and
yeah.
kind of potentially, and when I say negative way, it's just it's just how it works on the curve. Especially if you have like a bunch of mock trial kids in your trial advocacy class, right? Then it can impact you there. But that's really what's needed. I mean, I learned the most from like real world applicability, like clerking for law firms and the DA's office, clinics, and things like being on a competition team, where that's
Yeah.
how I learned evidence as well. I mean, it was very practical. I competed in a mock trial competition my first year in law school. Didn't realize it wasn't for first years, but my partner and I said, we're going to do it. And I think it was our semifinal round, one of our judges said, okay, so what's the evidentiary rule? And we looked at each other and we were like, oh my gosh, we have no idea, because we were first years. It was our first
Yeah.
semester. We were like 3 weeks into law school.
Right. That hadn't been covered yet.
Not at all. And so I ended up buying the Federal Rules of Evidence handbook. And before the next competition, which was a couple months later, I had read through the entire thing. I mean, a whole year and a half before I ever took evidence. And I got a lot of things wrong. I didn't fully understand like hearsay exceptions correctly, but I was really trying to learn it. And that was because I got kicked down and I wanted to do better. But so I do think AI is actually making this more possible. So it's
Yeah.
definitely more scalable. That way you don't have people like me saying, I'm gonna have to, practice with you 1,000 times a year, right? Like you can practice with
Yeah,
AI.
it's super intriguing application. I love it. And while we can't get into that now, I think for time reasons, but perhaps in a future episode we will. So I'm going to have to bid you farewell. Thanks very much for your time and expertise. Always a pleasure.
Thanks, Sean.
All right, that's it. You made it through another episode of the Empathic Edge. And if you'd like to learn more about Megan Smith, Empathic Edge, and their work around negotiation, communication, and AI-powered practice training, visit the website empathicedge.com. Thanks for listening, and do us a favor, subscribe, share, leave a review so people can discover smarter ways to handle difficult conversations. I'm Sean O'Connor. Have a great day.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.